Well, Andrew, it was a good talk. I hope to see you in the near
I'll
future.
see you later, Amos.
Take care.
Good seeing you.
Good evening, everyone. If you're here for the June 2023 Alcuin Society virtual lecture or conversation with Amos Kennedy Jr. and Andrew Steeves, you are in the right place. Just before we get underway, my name is Spencer Stewart. I'm the chair of the Alcuin Society. I thought I'd take a moment just to let you know a little bit about the society itself and some of the things that we do. We're founded in 1965, and the Society is the only nonprofit organization in Canada that's dedicated to the entire range of interests related to books and reading. And we do this through a variety of different avenues. One is through Emphora, which is the Society's journal. It's published 3 times a year, and we cover all sorts of topics, authorship, publishing, book design, book history, libraries, book selling, really you name it, we've featured it in one way or another. Another way that we continue our aims is through educational activities such as lectures and talks like the one this evening, as well as workshops and exhibitions. And this is at a variety of different institutions across Canada. Another final event that we do that sort of continues the discussion of book design in Canada is through the Alcuin Society's annual awards for excellence in book design in Canada. And it's the only national competition of its kind that recognizes and celebrates the art of the book in Canada. The winners of this award go on to represent the nation at the international exhibition and competition in both Frankfurt and Leipzig. And in continuation with that, the Society also offers an occasional Robert R. Reed Award and Medal to recognize lifetime achievement in book design and the book arts in Canada. So this is all to say that, you know, if you're not a member of the Alcuin Society, definitely check out our website after this session tonight and have a look and consider it. Again, tonight, as with all of our virtual lectures, a big thanks goes out to Gina Page for putting this together. And with that, I will pass it over to Andrew and Amos. We will be taking questions at the end of the session. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll make sure we get to them. And as well, if you know anyone that you found that this topic would be of interest to them, but they couldn't attend, we will be making this available through our YouTube channel a couple days after the event. So with that, I will just put both. Right. Mm-hmm. All right, gentlemen.
Have at it.
Hi.
Andrew, it's good to see you again.
Amos, it's good to see you. For those who don't know, you can find all kinds of information on the internet about Amos, and some of it's even true. But Amos is a wonderful Detroit-based printer who came to printing really in midlife, I guess, in terms of a career, came to it in midlife.
Well, that means I die at 80.
Yeah, well, yeah. And actually, went through some proper education and whatnot, and then decided to throw all that good knowledge away and become a bad printer. And he's been doing some pretty sloppy printing for several decades now. It's quite lovely. That's my introduction of Amos Kennedy.
And that is Andrew Steeves, who came to printing when he was just a toddler. And I really think of Andrew as like a country printer. He'll print anything with anything. He believes in the quality of the mark, not necessarily what makes the mark. And all things can make marks with quality. And what he and Gary have done at Gaspereau Press is just astonishing. And also with the help of their teams, both past and present members. And it is a model for the way that I work if I were going to actually become a multi-million-dollar publisher in the United States.
So, Amos, you invited me to come have this chat with you to translate, what you have to say into Canadian, I guess. And I hear that you want to talk about bad printing.
Not really. I just thought it was a way of getting people to actually show up. If you said that we're just going to sit around and talk about printing and the nuances and pallet jacks and moving equipment, a lot of people wouldn't have shown up. But a contest, like, oh my God, there's going to be a debate. We need to watch this.
It's the American way.
Let's face it. And in the world of private presses, small presses, quality of the mark is extremely important. And it is drilled into people from day one when they go and start in the field. And you have to admit that I have taken a slight turn to the left and not really abandoned, but just I consider it more experimentation of what you can do with the materials in letterpress printing.
Yeah, and that seemed to have been a very conscious decision, for you, in the same way that it was a conscious decision to step outside of the academic world. When you first went back to school and did your, it was an MFA, right? Like you
That's
did,
correct.
And worked with folks like Walter Hamady. You made a decision fairly shortly after that, after doing some sessional teaching, that like being inside the institution was not really going to be your scene. And you stepped out of that into just being a printer in the world, making things. And you also stepped out of a lot of the conventional notion about what people with your education do, what kind of things they make. And you really jumped hard into making more approachable, more vernacular things like posters. Do you want to talk maybe about that a little bit? Like why that choice?
Well, I had to do it because, as I tell people all the time, it takes a considerable amount of time and effort to put together a book. This is not something that you can do in a week. First you got to find the text, and then it's the setting of the text, the printing of it, the binding, and then finally trying to sell it. And that is when you look at people who do, in the US, is primarily what we call fine arts books and artist books. Most of the people have another job that allows them the free time to make that book. Because if it takes 6 months or a year to make a book and you have no income coming in, it gets to be sketchy. And so I needed a way of making a living because I didn't have any. And unfortunately, my parents did not make me a trust fund baby, which was extremely disappointing to me. And I have told them any number of times, that was a failure on their part, But so I found that doing posters for the community was a way of generating income on a fairly regular basis. And so I just did it. And I found that after I started doing it, I could actually sell large scale posters, 12.5 by 19, as a poster that people could afford and buy. Because one of the things about printing is that you make multiples, and because you make multiples, it reduces the cost involved, so you can pass that on to the public. Because when you do a book, especially if you're doing an artist book or a fine print book, it is going to be at least $250. And that that audience for it is extremely limited. And this is one of the things I like about you, is that, you do these books that are priced so the general public can actually afford them. And there is not a publisher in the US, a small publisher, a small printer that does that.
Yeah, one of the great privileges that I have in this particularly weird setup that we have, where we're not really anything, we don't really fit in any category. We're not truly a fine press. I'm often left out of discussions of fine press, actually. And I'm not really a normal trade printer, and I'm not really a normal literary publisher. So when I see a project, I can decide to make it a $5 offset chapbook, or a $20 letterpress chapbook, or a trade book for $25 with a little bit of letterpress on the jacket, or a $500 book printed handmade paper. I mean, I have the range. I can look at something and ask, what is its job, and who is it for, and I can follow those clues towards the right way of making it. And it strikes me that when you talk about the sort of economic reality of making rent by selling something that the community needs by providing a service, but it strikes me that there was more to that move than that, as there always is. That over time you build a connection with the community that you're serving by providing those objects, by providing that service.
Yeah.
In a way that sometimes if you're in the academy or if you're making art for collectors, that you're not having that same interaction with your community.
Yes. Well, again, as I said, one of the things about printing is that you make multiples. And when I started printing, I was still employed with AT&T. So I was able to print things and then just give them away to complete strangers and people I know. And there's something about giving an object to a person that they appreciate the way it's made and they're happy to take it away that cannot be monetized. And I still like that. And that's why I do things with the community. Yes.
Things, I suppose this is probably flip backwards.
Right.
The things that
Pease
you did for,
Lounge.
like Pease Lounge in your community, that's both a lovely thing and also it does a job.
Right. Well, that one actually I got drinks from Tees. So yeah, it was a job.
That works.
but he appreciated it. His clients appreciated it, and that was great. And for a period of time, half of my work was pro bono because the community that I worked in lived in just didn't have the funds to even pay $150 for 100 posters.
Yeah.
And so, but I looked at it that I was practicing my skills.
Yeah.
And so they were paying me to practice.
Yeah.
And so I felt that I was ahead of the game. And I would always tell people I make more money here than if I was at McDonald's. So I'm happy.
But your work really, through that sort of period of like apprenticeship, when you went to the South and stayed in small towns, did the work, started, getting your work out there, both in the practical sense, but also into the broader world of letterpress printing in North America and abroad. I mean, you were starting to evolve a style that was a little different from where you started. And it had to do a lot with layering, layering, printing over found objects like maps and so on. So when you started into that work, were there people that kind of gave you a hint of that, of what was possible, that you saw work and got you started on that road?
Well, one of the first works that I really appreciated was that of H.N. Verkman.
Oh yeah.
And the reproductions of his works in books, you could see the texture of the ink. And when you read about his technique, he would actually apply more pressure or less pressure to get a certain look out of the ink. And I really enjoyed that. And I have always experimented with layers. But one of the things I think that is true of all people who profess to be bad printers, what we really have done is taken the things that a fine printer or a really good printer would say, this is unacceptable. And we said, this is what is acceptable to us. Because again, if the inking isn't consistent, a real printer will say, no, I can't send this out. But we will say, yeah, this is the way it is. And printing on top of things came about because actually I had done it in when I was at Indiana on several projects. And one of the projects that I did when I was in graduate school was a book called Strange Fruit, where I printed text on top of images that completely covered the page. So the images bled off the pages, and then the text was on top of it. So I was familiar with that layering. But the layering really came into play when I had a commission and I only had 100 sheets of paper, and the commission was for 100, and I misspelled a word. And so I started layering so you couldn't see the misspelled word. And then from there, I just kept experimenting with it.
But generally, I think that would you argue that the kind of bad printing that you do is actually not indifferent printing, and it's not shoddy printing. It's just sort of weaponizing all the wobble that happens in printing and putting it in a direction to a purpose.
Yes, I mean, but the people who practice this, and that is Rowe in Argentina and Ian Wilhelm in the Netherlands, and then there is Lemon Press, I think, in Australia, but there are others. We all do it intentionally. We have seen a beauty in that, and we continue to explore it. And it is the same thing as, and we explore it with the same passion that a fine printer explores, making color on the page correct. But we have a little more freedom because it's like the messier it is, the more it excites us. And we don't necessarily have to repeat it again and again and again. It's like it can be a one-off. So you could say that we are more into monoprints than we are into editions, that one-off.
So would you also say that it's somewhat a critique of the commerce of fine printing? I mean, I often sort of laugh at often when I make a fine press book, I can't stop printing. So, there's the book, but then there's a slipcase, but then there's a chemise, but then there's like a wrapper in craft paper, and it's got 4 colors on it.
Right.
And my like wrapper that you are supposed to tear off and throw away. And often I'll glue them so you can't just like gingerly get them off and put them in Mylar or something. But no, they're clearly meant to be disposed of. Like there's more printing in my throwaway part than there is in something that someone else is charging, say, $200 for.
Right.
It makes me kind of laugh, But it is, but I do it partly as a kind of, not a severe critique, but just as a troublemaking exercise, a kind of problematizing exercise. And so, do you see that as part of like what's going on with bad printing or the school of bad printing, is that it is kind of a critique of our consumerism and our particularly as it relates to collecting and so on, the kind of elitism of like, I have 1 of 100 and you don't?
I do. I really do. One comment is that H.N. Verkman, one of the pieces that is highly collectible now, is a wrapper that he used to mail a book in, a little booklet in, because he would do a mailing every so often to about 40 people around the world. And so that wrapper is extremely collectible. So you're following in those footsteps, so to speak. Yes, not only do I think that it is a critique of fine printing and the cost of fine printing. For me, I look at it more as I don't want to waste anything. So if I have printed something and I don't like it, just hold on to it and I can print something on top of it. Because sometimes, actually, when I started printing, I would sometimes imagine what would it be like to have been a Black printer in 1930. I could not say, oh, I want to print something, so let me order a font of type for this specific job. Or, like, I just can't throw a character away because it has a little nick in it. Because my budget just doesn't allow that. So, and I think this comes from my apprenticeship in the South, but I think it's more an apprenticeship in the rural society where you don't waste anything, where you have a barn full of parts because one day you're going to need that part for something else. So why throw it away?
Mhm.
And so I look at it that way. Someone once asked me, "Do you have any process work for a project?" I said, "No, I print on all of it. I just print on everything." And so that I think is one of the things that really informs people who do what I call bad printing, or what some people call bad printing.
It seems too, Amos, to be, it reminds me of that great line from my buddy Wendell Berry's work, uh, no, no high culture without low culture. Right?
Yes.
So it's this notion of reconnecting these two worlds. I mean, the thing is, it's funny, I was talking to somebody the other day, and we were talking about inclusivity in the present fine press world, and talking about, and I was kind of going through my head and thinking, okay, how many like Black, Brown, Indigenous people I know in fine press or in letterpress? How many queer or transgender people do I know? And interesting, that was the category where I knew more people, frankly. But what I thought about was like, well, wait a minute. When it comes right down to it, like how many like rural people who grew up like I did do I know in fine printing? And it's like
Right.
that number is just as small. It's just as
Yeah.
small.
No matter what color.
Right. Well, that's my point. That's my point. In some ways that kind of there's somewhat of a class element to. I grew up. I never went in an art museum growing up. It just wasn't what our people did. All right. It wasn't for us. It was for somebody else.
Right.
And sort of to come, to go to university and sort of start sticking my toe where it didn't belong, and all these other kinds of things, and thinking about them and trying to imagine my way as a rural person into those things, and to feel like they were also my world. That was no small act. That was a long time coming. And I feel that it gives me great empathy with people in other more identifiable communities, who are looking at things like printing and saying, where's my place here? Like, am I welcome here? Because yeah, it's not a simple route in often to what we do, partly because of the overhead costs and so on.
Right.
Of equipment.
Well, I
Or you
think
have to
that
go to art school.
I was fortunate because I've always had a passion for libraries.
Mm.
And since I was like 7. And so I've always had this thing about books, and it just motivated me. And at some point, I took up calligraphy.
Mm.
And the problem with calligraphy, as I tell everyone, is that you finish this paragraph. I would finish this paragraph, and then I would misspell the last word. Which in letterpress, you just go and you just change those characters in the form and you reprint it.
Well, you just need to start a school of bad calligraphy and calligraph over top of it. That's all.
Yeah. So, but the fine press world is not that, and the world of book collecting is very rarefied. And it shouldn't be, because I really think that despite a little tick in it, if we are fighting against, the digital world for the dissemination of information. So the book is not present in people's lives the way it was when we were growing up. So to have the appreciation for this physical object that will allow you to appreciate, to begin to appreciate the quality of the way that it's produced, is in danger. And we have to really get out there and spread the gospel.
But I do think, I would argue, I mean, a lot of printing historically has been equipment heavy, and like literally and figuratively, and requires a lot of capital. But there's a corner of printing, particularly the kind of printing that you do, where like if you have a knife and a potato, like you can print, right?
Yes.
Like if you have a piece of linoleum, a piece of plywood, you can, and you want to, you can print. You can figure that out. You need pressure, and you need a relieved surface, and you
That's
need
it.
sort of nice sticky dark color ink, and then you can tell all of those people that sell us this free democratic thing called the digital thing, I can go tell them to go to hell. So in some ways, like, I think that's an interesting reversal, that printing has in some ways become more liberated and more free relative to our all being tied to these platforms. I think it's got a lot of legs as far as what it can do for our communities and what it can do for democracy relative to, say, Facebook or whatever the hell.
Well, one of the things that I'm excited about is Rizzo printing because it combines, the digital with a physical object. And you find that within the world of zines, Rizzo is extremely popular, and zines are just everywhere now.
Yeah.
Just everywhere.
Yeah.
And, and the quality of the zines are, are from really rough things as they started out in the 70s to very fine and well, considered pieces by graphic designers or people who have studied graphic design and book design. So I'm excited about that. But by the same token, I would like to see letterpress printing still be around, because the presses, as long as you oil them and you don't beat them up with a sledgehammer, they will be here. And people need to have access. And I think there is a small minority of people who will always want to print via the letterpress technique.
Well, there's something special about this surface, right? Like,
yes.
What is it about this that appeals to you, Amos? Why this? Why this and not the Risa? Why this and not the potato or whatever?
I think it's because it is very, what's the word I'm looking for? When I started printing, the woman who taught me how to print said letterpress printing is very patriarchal, and I think it has to do with that. Also, it's very architectural. And that carries on from the objects that you work with to the objects that you ultimately build, because a book is a manufactured good and you build it. And so you build it, and I think that there's a correlation between book building, printing, and architecture. And I found a lot of architects that were interested in letterpress printing because they could just physically, they related to the physicality of the objects. But wood type, I mean, metal type, let's face reality. Metal type on a soft paper with the right impression is like Navarra. It's like heaven. When you see a page printed just perfect, not too much punch, just the right kiss.
Yeah.
You have seen. And that is the consideration that the printer has, because I've seen offset printing that just looks magnificent.
Yep.
And I've seen letterpress printing, but letterpress printing, because it's, again, when you have that balance between the paper and the ink and the metal and the punch, the pressure, you have something there that is just eye candy. And you really don't get that with wood type, but you get this boldness that I like. I like the fact that it was used for advertising, and advertising is at the root persuasion. And that's what we do as humans. We seek to persuade people so we will have a consensus and we can move forward. And text in books do a persuasion in a quiet, gentle way. But wood type on a poster does it in a loud and boisterous way. And you may notice I'm loud and boisterous.
It has come up.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's me, And wood type is far more forgiving than metal type. Wood type, people will nowadays will accept the imperfections. As a matter of fact, will want to have the imperfections. I don't know if you remember, but maybe about 5 years ago, there was this trend to print with or to make images with broken type.
Yeah.
You know, because wood type will break and you can glue it back together or you can just keep it broken. But that was for 6 months to a year. You know, there were a lot of images appearing on Instagram of people printing with broken wood type. But wood type allows for that. And wood type also, and posters are really ephemera. They are just there for the moment. They are there because you have a message that you want to put out today, and
Mhm.
you do it. There's an issue that you want the public to address, and so you put it out, and hopefully, that changes are made.
It's an interesting amount of real estate to work with relative to, as a book typographer, most of my life is spent between, 10 and 14 point type sizes.
Right.
And where you're working with them en masse to make a page of the right density, when you squint at it, kind of thing. And there's something really bold, as you say, about using these large shapes that carry a lot of color, a lot of ink, and that can be layered, and to use them in a larger, a larger area. So on top of the ephemeralness, the ephemeralness of it, there's that element too, that it has this. I've always felt like you think about spelling, like you can kind of sort spelling out at normal text sizes, but when you start setting type, say over 24 point, or it starts to, you see words as full graphics. You don't really break them down, and your brain just tricks, and you miss spelling because you're looking at it like a graphic. So
Right.
it makes text takes this leap at certain sizes, and that has that negative connotation, but also has this very positive connotation of suddenly the counters in the letters become their own kind of song. They bring a sort of a harmony or a counter harmony to a composition, which is kind of
But letters are symbols of, of sound. So they are images. That's what letters are. They're images of sound. And a word is just a gathering, a collection of sounds that we can now interpret. Well, that's one of the things that I find most interesting about what I do, is that people will look at my work and immediately, because if they are English speakers, they see the message, they don't see the image, they don't see the letters as images, but they read it and as information. But if you give them the same text, say in Arabic or Chinese or Japanese, they'll say, "Oh my God, look at the way that the letters are shaped. Look at the curve there. Isn't that beautiful?"
Yeah.
No, it is still a stop sign.
That's right. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about your Pile of Bricks project and how that fits into this broader enterprise of let's use the big fancy word, decolonizing art and culture, popularizing, giving people access, giving community access to these materials so that they can tell their story, so they can express their reality in type. Talk a little bit about what you've been up to, why you moved to Detroit a number of years ago, what you're trying to accomplish with this building.
Well, I think that all letterpress printers seek converts to letterpress printing.
It is an evangelical enterprise, for sure.
We want to see the craft survive. Therefore, we are always looking for the next convert. And that is one of the things that the Pile of Bricks is supposed to do. I sincerely believe that the more experiences that you have, especially in your youth, the richer your life will become. And I believe that if somebody wants to experience letterpress printing, there should be a place where they can go and experience it. Not necessarily, I want you to be here for 6 weeks, one day a week for 6 weeks to take a course, but I just want to see what it's like. Come into my shop and make a poster real quick. If it's nothing more than your name or a "Mom, I love you" poster, do it and see if you like it. See what it's about. you'll have a different appreciation of it. And I must tell you that one of my great thrills is having children print,
Yeah.
because they start with this blank sheet of paper, then they crank the press, and there's this text, and they just go, wow! They just get excited, even in the age of digital. How did that happen? Magic. And they can say, if they're 10, they can see the text in the press bed, but they can't read it because it's backwards. Oh, yeah, they struggle at reading it. But then suddenly there it is, something that's readable. For me, the thrill of seeing that first impression pulled in Williamsburg, everybody won't have that. But everybody that will have it should have the opportunity to experience it. And that's what this is about, when one level. On the other level, here in the United States, when students leave the university, they are burdened with debt like nothing you've seen before. Therefore, they do not have the resources to establish a shop right away. And then the equipment may not be there because somebody who thought they wanted to print 10 years ago bought a press, put it in their basement, used it 2 times, and hasn't used it since. Or someone has a press and they're using it every day because that's how they make their living. So I wanted to provide a space for those people. If they have the time to take a vacation, they can come and print for a week because one, I have to pay the electricity, whether there's one person in the shop or 2. I got to pay the sewage. So it's no skin off my nose. And I use chipboard, which is still fairly inexpensive. So if you want to print with chipboard on a 12.5 by 19 size, I got plenty of it. And that's what I want.
The story that I hear over and over again, is a version of, in my last year of art school or graphic design, that I got to use a letterpress, and the fireworks went off. And then I graduated and they took my key.
Right.
And I really didn't have time to see whether this was for me. And yeah, so some big cities have open studios or collectives or cooperatives, and that helps that problem. But for a lot of people, and I have the conversation repeatedly with people in their 20s and 30s in particular who are, I think I want to do letterpress, but letterpress is like a shoebox that they haven't seen the contents of yet.
Right.
It's this concept. I think I want to do this thing, but they have no sort of meaningful tactile understanding of what it entails. And so it's a kind of like, hey, I saw this on eBay, should I buy it? And my answer is almost always, I don't know. Here's pros, here's cons, here's what else you need, here's how heavy it is. Your parents have a garage. So you're always dealing with that. So I really admire your approach, what you've amassed a fair amount of material over your years in printing and a variety of presses, and to be able to put them in a place and to make it part of your practice, to just constantly have people, if you can come and you can behave yourself and not treat everybody else badly, you're welcome to be here. Right. And that's just an incredible thing.
Yeah. The other thing that I was thinking about, but then it just kind of escaped me. That's the problem getting old.
Yeah.
It'll come back probably after this conversation's over with.
Well, you're thinking about it. You were talking about, the joy of having children in the shop. It's something with our Ways Goose that we really particularly enjoy, is having, regular old community people just come through with their kids and setting something, putting ink in a type and letting, them print it physically themselves. And you see that little explosion go up. And my grandson is already in printing some. He's like 2.5, Henry. And whenever I'm very fortunate, they've moved back to the area, so I drop in on the way home from the shop to see what he's been up to, and he'll ask me where I've been. I say, well, I've been at the print shop, and he'll go, roll. roll. Oh yeah, no, roll. I mean, that's had this incredible impression on him already, about what a thing that is, where there's
Right.
like ink over here and paper over here, and then there's something. Then there's something. It's really.
But what you have to remember is that in the civilization that we have right now, many people don't come in contact with industrial equipment. And, yes, what we do is industrial equipment, but it's not the big presses for newspapers, but just that simple thing. Most children, again, one of the things I always tell people is that everybody still has contact with printed matter, but very few people know how it's produced. And it's not produced on an inkjet printer or a laser printer, the commercial stuff, but that it isn't taught in schools anywhere. There isn't a course, there isn't a section of, say, down here, U.S. history, where they talk about the importance of the press and, Ben Franklin's press, at least, or Mark Twain's, printing adventures. So it is this industry that that touches everyone, but no one knows how it works.
Yeah. Yeah, and everyone just assumes it happens in China.
What's that?
Everyone just assumes that it happens in China.
Right.
Right. To the notion that things can be made made locally, made quickly, often, made precisely and particularly, to the needs of the community. Like, it's the same with growing food. It's the same with making clothes. It's the same with planting a garden. Any of these things. It's a high culture, low culture, needing to reconnect those things.
Right. And also,
we should probably wrap up here.
Okay, yeah, because we have questions.
We get to questions.
Yes.
But before we do, I wanted to ask you just a quick snapper, which is, if you can tell me one elder, shout out one elder you admire who had an influence on, and shout out to one younger up and coming printer who you're very optimistic about.
One elder that had a profound impact upon me was Bruce Beck in Chicago. He was a graphic designer, but he had a print shop in his basement. And I found that extremely fascinating. And a young person. That's kind of hard.
Young, this would be younger.
Okay. Oh, younger people, Well,
Well, that doesn't count.
Yeah, and because see, the thing about you, Andrew, is that you will print with just about anything. There are people who say, "Oh, if it's not foundry type, it's just not worth printing. How dare you use a photopolymer plate?" But does it make the mark, and is it appropriate for what I'm doing? That's what is important.
Right. Well, but the determining factor is the human hand behind it and the human mind behind it. These are just like ways to express like the real magic is in the human being, right?
Right.
That's the.
And Rich Kegler in Buffalo, Rich Kegler in Rochester is, he does really good work. But there are a lot of good printers out there now. There are tons of them. Mary Bruno is like a potty mouth, but she's dangerous.
Yeah. Well, and she's someone who's very engaged with her community. She's
right.
in Minnesota.
Very engaged. And I think that's one of the things that makes a good printer.
New York, she's figured out how to be in Minnesota, how to make that a place.
Absolutely.
Where is the center of printing, as far as Mary Bruno is concerned, and she's making it a center of printing.
Right.
In little old St. Joe's.
Little St. Joe's, and she, people love her, and that whole region, North Dakota, South Dakota, she has followings and people who come from there to study with her. And I think this is a good lesson that you don't have to be in a large metropolitan area to make it. Now, I'm in Detroit, but Detroit has fallen in population by almost half. And it is a struggling sort of city. I mean, Detroit has 134 square miles of vacant land. That's a lot of vacant land. I think that's right. No, they're 34 square miles of vacant land, because Detroit is 150 square miles. So 34 square miles of vacant land, but that's a lot of vacant land for an urban area.
Yeah.
And, I was able to come here because the cost of living at the time was affordable for the lifestyle I wanted. I didn't want to have to, have a $3,000, $4,000 a month rent note, because then I wouldn't be able to do what I do.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're gonna open it up for the public.
Yeah, let's bring Spencer back and he can moderate.
Thank you both. I'm just gonna pop up here. Yeah, as I mentioned, if anyone has any questions, please place them in the chat. We've got a couple that have come up. Just before that, I wanted to ask you, Amos, about something that you mentioned sort of at the top of the conversation. You said, you're talking about printing in terms of approaching it as additions, but that, when you put in these elements of what might be considered an error or a misprint, that it sort of turns it into a monograph, that it makes these moments kind of unique. And so I was wondering if there was sort of maybe an acceptance of chance or chance operations in your printing.
Oh, it's all chance. And it's a model print, not a monograph. Because
Right.
In the print world, a mono print is just one off.
Yeah, right.
But it's all about chance. I cannot duplicate anything I do.
Do you, when you're standing there in the process of making these prints, do you sometimes sabotage the process itself?
Sometimes when I'm printing, if I'm doing an edition, I will actually change the type in the press bed.
If it's going too smoothly, you gotta like get it away.
Right, and it's just, it is one of the things that I enjoy about people coming to my shop is that they will say, can I do this? And I'm like, I don't know, let's try it. If the press stops, because I use Vandercooks, if it stops, just call me, we'll figure out how to make it run again.
But I would say
people have come and done things I've never thought about, and then I incorporate them in my work.
It's chance with structure, though, like in the same way that jazz is, that it's not just random. It's you're building a structure in which improvisation is possible, and that's why you get a result that is worthwhile. It's just not utter chance. You're not just not usually anyway, throwing the type in the air,
right,
pouring some ink and seeing what happens. I mean, it's a little bit more structured than that, but it's a lot less structured than bookwork, say.
Yeah. I mean, I don't throw the type in the air, but I will throw like pennies in the air and then say, that's where I'm going to put the characters for the word. And in calligraphy, there was also the term of disciplined freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's that mix. There is discipline, but there's also a lot of freedom to it.
This is a question for both of you. That's also just come from your comment about what other art forms inform your printing practice? In terms of not you were saying it's like jazz, but you were talking about architecture earlier as well.
And definitely that one.
Like you'll come into
forestry, farming.
Yeah.
Those are the things
music,
I know.
Music, architecture, just life in general. The thing is that everything informs what I do, and it has an impact upon me. Sometimes I know consciously that it comes from this source, and then other times it's just an unconsciousness that happens.
But definitely when I started doing this, the kind of like a sucker growing out of a stump, like you've got a maple tree down, and then all these suckers grow fast because they have this developed root system. Well, that developed root system for me when I started was sort of like a childhood of drawing houses and being on work sites and thinking about how those kinds of structures went together, how human beings, what made a space inhabitable for human beings in terms of, moving through a building beyond just functionality, but what made a space inhabitable, and moving that thinking over to, well, what makes a book inhabitable? How this also is a social space where humans gather. How do you make that work? So yeah, definitely, I think if you're paying attention, you're drawing from all your other interests and all your other curiosities.
Well, I can also say that my undergraduate was in mathematics, and that plays heavily into the work that I do and the way that I approach it. And then the years I spent as a computer programmer, the fact that you had to, we now call it hacking, but you had to come up with a solution that didn't exist.
And with the mathematics, is it to do with more the kind of the layout?
No, it has more to do with randomness.
Mm.
And well, it's not really randomness because I'm just doing a piece right now where I'm trying to figure out how I work, but it has to do with a lot of statistics and probability and the arrangement of that, that the combinations that are possible, especially with the backgrounds that I work on.
All right, so I have a question here. What political ends is letterpress uniquely or especially suited to serve?
I don't know that it's special.
Letterpress, what political ends?
Yeah.
It is, letterpress is a neutral technique that serves all ends, but I use it to bring about a society that embraces the humanity of all peoples.
Yeah, I mean, the Nazis were awesome printers. they were very.
They had Heidelbergs.
It's like any tool. It's neutral to a certain extent. Not neutral. Every material and every tool brings its characteristics to bear, and they have to be wrestled with, contended with. And in the best cases, you're leaning out into the positives, and leveraging those to make it something really great. But it really is the human behind it. And I think if there's anything that letterpress in the current moment, in its current usage, it has, as we were talking about earlier, like it doesn't have an accessibility. Like it's hard to get the equipment, but if you get access to the equipment, you then you don't have to get an upgrade. You don't have to plug it in. You don't have to, it's just available to be manipulated to express what you need to express. And it'll keep doing that as long as you can find a substrate to print on and some ink to print with. It'll go and go and go. So I mean, that non-obsolescence or whatever maybe is what is political about it that I like.
Yes.
Question here we have is there an organization for letterpress and the arts in Detroit that you feel needs more support? This is
Signal Return, which is a community arts center, community letterpress arts center, needs all this. All art organizations need more support, and Signal Return is the letterpress art, because here in the United States, the arts gets minuscule support from the government, so it's all privately funded. So we need all of them need it, but Signal Return is here in Detroit, and they serve the community in numerous ways that allow organizations that do not have access to letterpress printing. They have one program where they partner with the organization and a printer to make a poster for them. And normally they do about 10 a year. And these posters are then sold by the organization or given away to contributors. So that is the one, if anyone wants to contribute, that is the one to contribute to.
We have a question here of, and this was for Amos here. Do you offer a residency? And if so, what does it entail?
My shop is open whenever I'm there, and you just got to show up. And I tell people that, you just show up and that's it. There's no residency. It's like you come, you can't spend like 6 months. I had one guy to spend 6 months one time, but so I said, nah, that's over with. You come and if you don't know how to print, for what I do, I can teach you in 4 hours how to make a poster. And then you can spend the rest of your life figuring out how to do it right. So yeah, I don't do residencies. I don't, like, oh, fill out a form and that. If you're brave enough to approach me, then you're crazy enough to work with me.
What would you say your average time is for some of the work that you do? Like you were talking about projects you're working on right now, and it strikes me as some of them, they seem to have like almost like an ad hoc style to them, and then there's other ones that seem like you're really working on the piece a little more.
Well, if I have a commission, it normally takes me 6 weeks to do a poster.
Mhm.
That's because I don't rush it. I just like, okay, I got a poster to do. And also is that one of the things with doing posters that people will come to you 2 weeks before the event and say, I need the poster. But they started planning the event a year in advance. Well, why didn't you come to me then? So I'm trying to wean people off of that. But in all seriousness, if I had to do a 4-color background with black text, and you wanted 125 of them in a rush, I could do it in a week. And that's done on a Vandercook that I have to hand ink because I don't have a motorized inking device on it.
For both of you, I think maybe to wrap up this evening, what are some projects that you're both working on right now that you can talk about that you're excited about?
Well, this afternoon, I spent a good part of the afternoon brayering paper. I'm into using the brayer for backgrounds right now. And so I'm just playing with color and brayering and seeing what I can do and what kind of marks happen. And then I'm going to use those just for backgrounds, because now I have access to one press that will allow me to print 70 centimeters by 100 centimeters. So I'm printing big now. And that's the wonderful thing about that is I print big and then I can't get rid of them. Because, I don't know how much to sell them for, because I can't sell them, oh, that's a big poster, you should sell it for $75. I don't know anybody that has $75 that can buy a poster. Okay. So it's like, God, but my other posters sell for 25, so I can't sell it for 30, so I'm just playing around with that. And then I end up giving them away most of the time. If you show up at my shop, bring a suitcase because you're going to leave with a lot of stuff.
Or a lot of wheat paste, maybe. Yeah. Beyond all the little bits and pieces of things always going on here with the trade work, probably the next big project for me is I'm doing a fine edition of poet John Thompson's book Still Jack, which was published by Nancy Press in the mid 70s, and really quite an incredible collection of poetry. And so it's going to be done in probably edition of book 50 on probably on Hahnemühle paper, a couple colors. So a slow project, a lot of composition, but a book that certainly was very important to me when I came upon it in my 20s, and about the geography I grew up in. But Amos and I are also cooking up a project to do together, sort of like to get Amos bound in a book here. So
yeah,
we're looking at doing an edition of Henry David Thoreau's Civil Disobedience with some interruptions by Amos Kennedy.
I thought you were going to send me all your fine printed stuff and I could print on top of it.
Oh, was that what was going to happen? Still in negotiation. Still in negotiation.
As a matter of fact, if you have any misprints or anything like, oh, save it and I will print over the top of it. Because why throw it away?
Well, yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, no, we've been friends for quite a while now. And I mean, our work on the surface looks different, but really we're on the same page, working towards a lot of the same goals, trying to make the same kind of change in our communities. And I really appreciate the work you do, Amos.
Well, I appreciate what you do. And I was thinking about that. And a poet once said, we do different things differently, and that's what we have in common. The differences that we have is one of the things that we have in common, because we always think about, oh, I'm different. But if you're different and I'm different, that the difference is shared. It's a commonness. And we both have a love for the product that we produce. And I sincerely believe that you appreciate what I do as much as I appreciate what you do. And the products that you produce are really outstanding when you think that you do commercial work as well as fine print work.
Thanks. Thanks. Yeah. No, and I think that we both have a lot of faith in what these old tools can do to make our communities work better.
Yeah.
Well, I think I could speak on behalf of the chat and the various conversations that are coming in that people really appreciate the work that both of you are doing. And I just want to thank you both for taking the time to speak about the various ideas you have and approaches. We're going to make this conversation available online in a couple of days through the YouTube channel for Alcuin, and stay connected with our online platforms, Instagram and other things for various announcements coming up. We have a Ways Goose that will be happening in the fall, which we'll let you know about once that comes together. And Andrew, you have a Ways Goose coming up as well in the fall.
We do.
On that.
Yeah. October, oh goodness, I can't remember, 21st maybe. It's right around there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll be posting about it on Instagram and so on the coming months. Amos will be coming this year. And who else is coming? Phoebe Todd Parrish from Toronto will be coming, who's a great Linotype artist and printer. And St. Bridget Press. Oh God, why can't I just Amos, I can't remember names. I'm so embarrassed. Anyway, St. Bridget Press will be here.
Also, I'd like to say, if the audience will send me their postal address to Kennedy Prints at Proton Mail, I'll send them a 6x8 card.
Emily Hancock is the third.
See, I gave you some time.
That's right. Thank you, Amos. I'll just stop and dance.
Well, and then so that will
thank you.
That'll be Inky Brawl part 2 will happen in the Ways Goose there. Great. Well, thank you both, and thanks everyone for coming in tonight, and stay close to what we're doing. Our announcements, we'll be having some stuff probably closer to September. So all the best, and have a great summer. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Okay, take care and be safe.